Welcome to BWC News. I am Elizabeth. China has started hoarding gold in large quantities, and this is not a simple matter. Russia has been hoarding a lot of gold since 2014, until 9 years later when it emptied its U.S. debt and its gold reserves reached 2,326 tons, ranking 5th in the world after France. Is China going to follow the same route as Russia? To empty its hands of more than 800 billion U.S. debt? Let's look at a set of data. According to the statistics released by the central bank, by the end of the first quarter, China's total gold reserves have exceeded the historical mark of 2,000 tons, compared to the end of last year, an increase of 66 tons. The total gold reserves are now second only to Russia. And according to gold import and export data released by the World Gold Council and Swiss Customs, the total size of China's gold holdings has reached a staggering 778 tons so far this year, with an investment amount of nearly 350 billion renminbi. And according to a letter written by the CEO of a strategic services firm to a client, cited by the US media earlier, China may actually own 30,000 tons of gold. In other words, China may actually have more gold reserves. Meanwhile, China has been reducing its U.S. debt holdings for 7 consecutive months, selling a total of $170 billion in U.S. debt throughout 2022. According to the latest data, China now holds a total of $869.3 billion in U.S. debt. So is China really ready to liquidate its U.S. debt in the long run by hoarding gold in such large quantities? First, let's talk about the truth behind China's massive gold hoarding. The fundamental reason that is because the amount of U.S. gold reserves is questionable. To put it bluntly, it is the United States' home base is not open and transparent, which will make the world worry about the credit of the dollar. Although the U.S. dollar is now a credit currency, but the back of the look or the United States of America's home base, home big others will believe you, the home base has been emptied, but also let others how to believe in the value of your dollar? It is said to be a credit currency. In fact, it is still related to the amount of gold reserves of the United States. According to the Federal Reserve's data, the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank holds about 7,000 tons of gold from more than 60 countries and international organizations around the world. At the same time, the United States also claims to have more than 8,000 tons of gold reserves, ranking first in the world. This is the reason why countries around the world believe in the U.S. dollar and are willing to deposit their gold in the U.S. But in recent years, some analysts have questioned the amount of U.S. gold reserves, as well as the amount of gold the Fed holds for the world. First, according to a recent analysis by Zero Hedge, the U.S. has been selling gold for nearly 22 years in a row, with most of the gold exported going to markets like Switzerland, the UK, and Asia. So there is evidence to suggest that the U.S. actually may or may not have 8,000 tons of gold left in reserve. U.S. Congressman Mooney said that since 1986, a significant portion of the U.S. gold reserves have been stored in the vaults of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, but have not been audited. This means that the amount of gold reserves is based on the mouth of the United States. In addition, due to the impact of the continued interest rate hike of the dollar and the increased risk of economic fragmentation in the U.S. in recent years, many countries have started to ship back their gold stored in the U.S., but some countries have been refused by the U.S. and have been unable to ship back their gold. This leads one to suspect that over time, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve may have sold, exchanged, leased, or otherwise encumbered some of the gold stored in the United States. Although all the above statements have not been finally confirmed, it makes countries to re-examine the U.S. home base, plus the U.S. is now raising the U.S. debt ceiling one after another, which makes countries to re-examine the credit backing of the U.S. dollar. The reason behind China's continuous selling of U.S. debt and increasing its gold holdings is actually to hedge the risks of the dollar economy. Because all the signs are indicating that the long-term economic risks of the United States are still there. Let's talk about whether China is ready for the long term and whether it will really clear its U.S. debt in the future. In recent years, in addition to China's massive increase in gold holdings, all countries in the world are increasing their gold holdings in large amounts. According to data released by the World Gold Council, global central banks increased their gold holdings by 228 tons in the first quarter of 2023, and 24% of central banks tend to increase their gold reserves this year. As I said in the previous program, with the dollar raising interest rates and the US debt ceiling one after another, global concerns about the US economy are getting more and more serious, and now both large and small countries are de-dollarizing and increasing their gold holdings. The global trend of de-dollarization is irreversible, but global de-dollarization does not mean that the United States will be reduced to a second-rate country. So from this point of view, China's increase in gold holdings and the sale of US debt must be a long-term preparation. At a certain point in time in the future, the amount of gold reserves and US debt reserves to a reasonable range is what we must do. As for whether China will really empty the US debt like Russia in the future, it depends on the trade relations between the two countries. First of all, China and Russia are not the same. Russia is only an energy power, and the United States itself is also an energy power. In addition to the Middle East countries are energy powers, so Russia's energy supply is not the most deadly for the United States, which is the reason why the United States dare to recklessly sanction Russia. And China is not only a major economic power, but also a major manufacturing country, but also a major exporter. From these points alone, even if the United States then restrict the development of China, but also cannot be separated from the trade with China. To put it bluntly, the United States is worse off without Chinese products, and there is no substitute for the world. In addition, many countries around the world are now strengthening trade relations with China and allowing the use of the RMB to settle international trade. China and the RMB's international status is rapidly rising at the same time, but also accelerating the world's countries away from the United States. From the above points, the future between China and the United States must be in competition, while in the contradiction of cooperation. The United States cannot see the good development of China, but do not dare to really come hard. Therefore, the future competition between the two powers will certainly not go as far as Russia today as a rift. Since the relationship between the two sides is not likely to break, then the United States will not dare to easily freeze our dollar assets, and there is no need to empty the US debt. After all, we have to use the US debt to make money, use the dollar to buy products. As for the future pattern of the world economy, it must be a world economy in which China and the United States go hand in hand. And in monetary policy, it must not just stay on the basis of a country's credit currency, it will certainly return to the gold standard again, in addition to anchoring with a country's economic volume, to develop a more reasonable, more standardized, more open, more transparent, more just global monetary policy, which is the inevitable social development.